research project, we decided to look into the why and how of the University of Maryland's decision to implement tuition hikes, as it is a subject that directly influences our education. Our research covers the history of the hikes and its influence on other universities, including our own, as well as the organizational structure and key individuals responsible for the decision. We will also review the logistics of the tuition hikes, point out how the money raised is utilized, and finally list our own feedback and suggestions for raising money. This is all so that we can get a better understanding of why the university chose tuition hikes as a means of raising money.
For those who are business, computer science, and engineering majors, it should be old news that UMD hiked your tuition. We imagine that said news is still cringeworthy to hear nonetheless. There are a large number of reasons behind the implementation. However, the fact remains that many students in those majors felt blindsided by the tuition hikes. UMD tuition is already high enough as it is, with in-state students around $10,000 a year and out-of-state paying around about 3 times that amount annually. Adding another $700 a year feels like adding insult to injury to the wallets of both students and their families. What we found from our research is that there was a lack of communication between the Office of the President and the students regarding the differential tuition hikes. As a result, the decision and its effects were negatively received by the students. This could have easily been resolved had there been more clarity on the matter. Being properly informed of the decision, as well as its benefits for the majors affected, would help people cope with the extra payments. Finally, considering the fundraising capabilities of this university, we think UMD had other options available than raising tuition. Now we will discuss some of the history of the differential tuition hikes nationwide and the background of the decision at the University of Maryland. Tuition hikes were relatively unheard of until the 1980s. At this point, individual colleges and universities around the country began to realize that they could charge different amounts for different programs. The motive behind these hikes were very diverse. In some cases, it was simply a revenue driver for the university, where it could squeeze its students in high-demand programs for an extra dollar. In other cases, it allowed the school to use the money to expand its programs and stay competitive. These uses included attracting top faculty, purchasing state-of-the-art equipment, and/or improving the college's marketing. According to a study from the Cornell Higher Education Research Institute, over 140 colleges and universities from around the country have implemented some form of differential tuition. One example is fellow Big Ten school, the University of Wisconsin. In most of these cases, the payment of differential tuition was based on how far students were along in their program. For example, juniors and seniors would be charged a different rate than freshmen or sophomores. Another trend seen around the country are the common majors impacted by differential tuition. It is not surprising that the most common majors facing hikes are business, engineering, and nursing. These programs are often the most expensive, competitive, and prestigious. An Inside Higher Ed article found that both engineering and business enrollments dropped about 1.1% in these universities following the imposition of a tuition rate hike. It is very alarming to see that tuition hikes may be dissuading students from pursuing a particular major. Additionally, it seems to go against the country's push for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and service-driven careers. The same article then reached an alarming conclusion. If raising tuition on certain programs leads to a decline in enrollment, then the college may not gain too much in additional revenue from each student. Differential tuition hikes can only be successful if the specific major is in such high demand by the students that a price increase will not impact their decision. Now we will turn our attention to specifically exploring differential tuition at the University of Maryland, College Park. The office ultimately responsible for the tuition hike decision was the Office of the President. Although developed over many years by President Lowe and his support staff, it was only on May 1st, 2015 that President Lowe sent out his final proposal outlining his differential tuition plan. On May 6th, the Board of Regents approved the plan. Prior to the finalization of the tuition hikes, several students during the spring 2015 semester organized a petition opposing the tuition hikes. This clearly shows the differences in priorities for the faculty and student body. The Office of the President had to receive and did receive approval for the decision from both the Board of Regents and the Office of the Dean at the affected programs. The Board of Regents can be thought of as the highest governing power over the entire University of Maryland system. The head or CEO of the Board of Regents is Robert Carey. The deans of the individual schools are Alex Triantis at Smith, Darrell Pines at the A. James Clark School of Engineering, and Chairman Samir Cooler at the Computer Science Department. The actual administering and dissemination of the decision was closely collaborated with the individual offices of the Dean and the Office of the Bursar. The Office of the Bursar is responsible for the collection of fees and tuitions of all students at the University of Maryland, College Park. Here is a look at the organizational structure and the key individuals within each grouping. The university also has a history of using donations for funding. In 1992, Leo Van Munching donated $6 million to help finance the expansion and renovation of Van Munching Hall, which gave Smith the most advanced information technology infrastructure in the nation. In 1998, Robert H. Smith, an alumnus that graduated in 1950, pledged $15 million in support of the business school. They named the Robert H. Smith School in his honor, since this gift allowed the school to develop facilities and resources it needed to make its vision a reality. There have been other generous donations, but these two are the most significant to the development of UMD's business school. There were several potential biases in the decision-making process undertaken for the differential tuition hikes. First, self-serving bias indicates that a disproportionate weight might have been given to the agendas of those on the committee, reputation of the school over the welfare of its students, and President Lowe's prestige boost from creating a more elite as opposed to affordable academic institution. Furthermore, the bias of selective perception implies that a preoccupation with obtaining finances without due consideration of cost entailed to do so may have occurred, and that decision-makers' insulation from student interaction may have led to a resulting lack of adequate empathy for student plights. Lastly, anchoring bias holds that decision-makers likely thought of the tuition hike as a relatively small increase on standard tuition without considering that tuition is already absurdly high. Thus, the increase in the tuition is more harmful than the decision-makers might have acknowledged. These biases all have the capacity to lead to a suboptimal decision process. The tuition hike has a gradual implementation scheme and a reasonably wide range of impact. Seniors in the affected majors are paying an additional $700 in tuition this year, while juniors are paying an additional $700 this year and $1,400 senior year. Additionally, sophomores will experience a $1,400 tuition increase junior year and a $2,800 increase as seniors, while this year's freshmen, as well as future incoming students, are set to pay an additional $2,800 in both junior and senior year. Those primarily affected by this problem include students, families, financial backers, and staff. Stakeholders have a great deal of skin in the game for this tuition hike. The differential tuition hike has a set distribution plan and receives the support of faculty. Of the revenues raised by the hikes, 65% will go toward hiring, quote, 23 new faculty members, 5 business, 12 engineering, and 6 computer science, as well as improving the student-to-faculty ratio across the departments, end quote. Furthermore, 10% of that revenue will go toward increasing enrollment in the programs affected by the hike through increasing the number of course sections available, and 25% will be for Pell Grant recipients and other financial aid. Since this distribution of revenue is thought to add value to degrees in these fields, the affected deans support the differential tuition hike wholeheartedly. Dean Triantis goes so far as to cite a survey by the Business School's Dean's Student Advisory Council that concludes that, quote, business undergraduates are willing to pay more for better quality services, end quote. The problem with the university's implementation is demonstrated in our research. First, we found that only in the spring semester of 2015, one semester after the initial tuition increase, did students seem to fully grasp what was happening. Additionally, our team surveyed a variety of students at the University of Maryland, including students affected by the hikes and those unaffected. The results were very polarizing. The chart on the left shows that a majority of students believe that tuition hikes are not equitable. In other words, students feel that the decision was not completed in a fair manner, nor considered the financial impacts on the students. The chart on the right demonstrates that students were not well informed about the uses of the extra tuition money. In fact, 34.55% of students strongly disagree with the statement that they were well informed. This lack of disclosure to students truly demonstrates that differential tuition implementation needed to be better communicated to gain approval from university students. While the tuition hikes do serve to better the education of students, there are several critiques and possibly better solutions that do not involve increasing the financial burden placed on the student body. The first and most concerning critique of the tuition hike is the pressure it puts on students already reeling from high tuition costs. Students may be forced to choose a major that does not have a tuition hike simply because they cannot afford the extra financial burden that comes along with specific majors. Selecting a major should be based on a student's interest and aspirations, not their current financial position. An additional critique is that the university could have communicated with students more effectively about the tuition hike and been clearer about the process undertaken in their decision. Explanatory emails further in advance of the hikes would have helped this, along with potentially reaching out over social media. These recent tuition hikes may also result in isolating business, computer science, and engineering students. The University of Maryland preaches academic diversity, reaching out to classes one may not normally take just to see if it piques an interest. Academic diversity should be the goal of every university. Students should be reaching out to other majors to expand their viewpoints and not limit themselves to one singular subject. But with the tuition hikes, students are much less inclined to reach out to other subject matters when they are already paying significantly more for the opportunity to take courses in their current major. Finally, singling out specific majors to increase tuition can be interpreted as the university saying that certain majors are better than others. While this is not true, many react negatively to what they believe the University of Maryland is implying.
We decided to apply Lewin's three-step model solution to create organizational change at the University of Maryland. This model consists of the unfreezing, movement, and refreezing steps. In the unfreezing step, a change maker attempts to create awareness of problems within the organization. This step is where the Office of the President would have to convince the academic departments on campus that student dissatisfaction with differential tuition can only be resolved by scrapping the hikes and implementing alternative change. In the movement phase, the university can take action to improve communication and clarity of any subsequent decisions it may make, as well as choosing an alternative to differential tuition hikes, such as fundraising. Finally, to reinforce refreezing, the step where the change becomes the status quo, the university could hold monthly town hall-style meetings to discuss current financial remedies that have been and are being attempted, as well as their tangible effects. The Office of the President would gain valuable feedback and get to showcase how they are trying to raise funds to improve the education of students.
A major solution would be to use wealthy alumni even further to fund the resources of the business school. Wealthy alumni are willing to donate to support research. Perhaps we just need to further tap this resource.
In conclusion, while the university's intentions for the tuition hikes were for the benefit of students, the execution was not properly communicated to foster student acceptance.